CONNIE GARTSIDE'S TRIUMPH, Chapter 13. Just let me move the tandem away from the wall, Connie, and then you can get on. I need to make sure the satellite is right for you. Connie placed her left leg in the toe clip on the left-hand pedal and swung her right leg over the saddle and sat down. She attempted to place her right shoe in the right-hand toe clip, but was having trouble. The pedal kept rotating as soon as the shoe made contact. Malc took hold of the back of what he presumed was her ankle to assist her. He looked up at her in surprise. "You've an artificial leg." "Yes, I meant to tell you." She gazed at him with her bright green eyes, afraid he'd refuse to take her. However, although he shook his head, he placed the shoe in the toe clip and tightened the strap slightly. "Is the ankle articulated?" "Yes, and it's spring-loaded." He nodded his understanding. "The question is it articulated enough? Pedal backwards, Connie, but do it slowly. Stop if you feel any problem." He watched carefully as she did as he asked, completing 2 revolutions. "Okay, that seems fine. Can you dismount safely? I need to take the saddle up slightly." She was off the bike quick as a flash and watched him release the saddle clamp, raise the saddle post 1/4 of an inch, and then reclamp it. "That should do it, Connie. We'll give it a try round the yard, and then we'll be off. But if you feel the slightest discomfort, you must tell me." She smiled. "I will, I promise." All this time he'd been holding the bike upright by holding the front saddle with his right hand, leaving his left hand free to assist her. He now grasped it with his left hand, facing forwards. Much to Connie's surprise, he suddenly lifted his left leg and swung it over the handlebars, lifting the limb as high as any showgirl on the stage. Now straddling the tandem's top tube, with his hands firmly on the handlebars, he placed his left foot in the toe clip, pressed forward on the crank, simultaneously lifting his body to sit on the saddle. His right foot found its place in the toe clip as they began to move forward. She squealed as they circled the yard, but before she knew it, he'd made his way round the cow byre and came to a halt by the gate next to the Bentley. "Oh, I forgot to tell you, Connie, it's your job to open and close gates." She laughed as she dismounted, feeling more excited than she'd felt in a long time. "What do you want to do, Tom, now you've been dispossessed of transport?" "I was hoping to go to Edale. I don't know now." "We could walk there." "Walk?" Rosie laughed. "You've got a good pair of legs. You can't have forgotten how to use them." "But it's miles to Edale." "Don't be daft. It's not that far. We can go over by Edale Cross." He looked across the table at her for quite a long moment. "Do you know the way?" he finally asked. "Of course. I've walked there many times." Another long silence. "Okay, but don't walk too fast." "Right, go and get your windproof, and I'll let Mrs. Gartside know where we're off to." "This is wonderful." "What did you say, Connie?" "This is wonderful," she repeated, raising her voice. "How fast are we going?" "Not fast. Almost 20 miles an hour. They were speeding down the Kinder Road towards the village, seemingly without any effort. They seemed to have been freewheeling for ages. As soon as they entered the village, Malc slowed the tandem down to negotiate the narrow streets. They were soon at the junction with the main road to Glossop. "Turn right and then left," Connie informed him. Malc shook his head. "No, I need to do some shopping for food first. I'll head towards Newtown and turn right in the main shopping street in New Mills. Then we'll come back on the top road after we've picked up the tubing." Connie realised it made sense and quickly agreed. At first their route was fairly flat, but they soon built up speed again, the sheer momentum of the tandem taking them over the small rises they came across. Malc informed her they were cruising at 22 miles an hour. Eventually they reached the long straight downhill stretch that led them into New Mills, and Connie began to understand just how fast a tandem could move. By the time they were nearing the valley bottom, they were travelling at over 45 miles an hour, and much to Connie's joy, had overtaken 2 cars. Then the brakes were being applied. Malc looked quickly over his shoulder to check the road behind was clear, signalled right with his arm outstretched, and moved to the centre of the road before stopping at the T-junction. A couple of cars passed, then the road was clear, and soon they were climbing the hill to the right, eventually coming to a halt outside the co-op. "You get off first, Connie, and then I'll shove it against the wall." She did as asked, and then volunteered to guard it whilst he did his shopping. "What do you think so far, Connie?" "Brilliant, it really is. I want a bike of my own now." He smiled, obviously pleased with her reaction. "I won't be long. See you in a couple of minutes." He disappeared into the store. The girl didn't have to wait too long before he emerged with a carrier bag full of food. "Is there anything you need whilst we're here, Connie?" "No, I just want to get back on the tandem." He stuffed the food in the left-hand pannier bag, asking, "Have you ever cycled before?" as he did so. "No." "Well, you must be a natural. You make a good tandem stoker. I could really feel the difference when we were riding up the hill." She remained silent, but his praise had found its mark. She felt a warm glow inside. "Right, Connie, I'll get on first this time, then you climb aboard, but I'm not going too far. I'm in need of a cup of coffee." "There's a nice cafe up the road at the junction with the road to Marple." "Good choice, Connie, I know it well." "How's your mum, Tom?" "She's okay. She's got a new job working for the Victorian Society, but she was really upset when Dad dropped me off on Friday night." "Why?" "Bloody John Major." "Tom, you shouldn't swear." "Dad says John Major's enough to make a parson swear." Rosie laughed in response, but then looked thoughtful. "My mum was upset by what he said as well. Trouble is, Major thinks everybody has the chance to live in some kind of ideal family. He hasn't a clue how people really live and how they have to cope to survive." He looked at her for a moment, knowing only too well the terrible circumstances that had deprived Rosie of her father. "I'm lucky," he said. "I know Mum and Dad love me. The fact they can't live together's a shame, but they've never let it affect me. I've got friends who live in so-called normal families, and their parents are constantly rowing. I couldn't stand that. I've never known my parents argue." Rosie looked at him in surprise. "I've heard your dad argue." Tom laughed. "Only about religion or politics. I meant I've never known Mum and Dad have an argument about me, and they've never been nasty to each other, as far as I know." "Grandad says your dad loves an argument. He reckons he could start a row in an empty paper bag." Tom laughed again. They were sat on a grassy bank above a stream, near the old Packhorse Bridge at the bottom of Jacob's Ladder. Eventually Rosie stood up. "We'd better make a move. By the time we get to Edale, it will be time to go home." Tom nodded his agreement. "Once we're through Barber Booth, we can walk up the road to Edale village." "Isn't there a footpath, Rosie?" "Yes, but the road will be easier and quicker." "How did you lose your leg, Connie?" There it was, the inevitable question she didn't like being asked. "A motorcyclist hit me, but it wasn't really his fault. He spotted me on the road and put his brakes on to slow down, but he skidded on loose gravel and went over on his side. His front wheel just slid into my leg and took a big lump out of it." She looked him in the eye, steeling herself against the look of pity she hated so much. Instead, much to her surprise, he just shrugged. "Life's a struggle and then we die," he said, with a wry smile. "The important thing is to make sure we make the best of it whilst we can." "Exactly. That's what Ralph always said. Pick yourself up, dust yourself down, and start all over again." "Good for you, Connie. Come on, we've work to do and miles to ride." "Mal?" "Yes?" "Do you know why Ralph and Rosie want this stuff we're picking up?" "Yes, to make sledges. Ralph showed me his workshop last night." "Are you going to help them?" "They seem to know what they're doing without my help. Ralph's obviously good at brazing, and he's got tube bending equipment and all the other tools he needs. But there's not much of a future in building sledges, is there? It's a very brief season for snow." "Well, yes, you're right. but he can use the same skills and equipment to manufacture all kinds of things. Like bike frames. Is that what you mean? Well, yes, that's a possibility. Would you be willing to teach him? She interrupted herself. No, I don't mean that. What I mean is, would you be willing to teach me? A newfound friend frowned, obviously caught off balance. He took a long sip of coffee. Why do you want to learn? He eventually asked. I want to be useful. I want to be part of their team, and I want to build myself a bike. It's not easy work, Connie. Mitering bike tubing cuts your hands to ribbons. He showed her his fingers and the palms of his hands. His right palm in particular was a mass of fine cuts and scars. It's dirty work. You get covered in carbon from the oxyacetylene and filings from the steel. It gets in your hair and on your clothes and up your nose and in your mouth, unless you wear a mask. I don't mind hard work, and I don't mind muck. I'm a farmer's daughter. We delve in muck day in and day out. He smiled, realizing from the vehemence of her tone she was serious. Okay, he finally said. If you're willing to work at it, I'll give you all the help I can. She nodded. I'm deadly serious. I have to prove I can do it. So, how was your day? Just let me get my leg off and I'll tell you. Rosie sat up in bed, her back propped up by a pile of pillows. There, Connie grinned, making her own way under her duvet. She gazed across at her friend. It was the best day ever. Malc's really nice. After we brought the tubing back, we went for a ride. We went to Whaley Bridge and then to Chapel-on-Frith and climbed up Rushhope Edge. We whizzed down Winnett's Pass to Castleton, and then went to Hope and up through Edale and over Mamnick, and then we whizzed down Rushhope Edge and overtook 3 cars. You should have seen the drivers' faces. He told me I'm a really good tandem stoker, but best of all, he's going to teach me the art of building bike frames. In fact, he's going to teach me how to measure people up and build frames tailored to their particular size and their individual requirements, like making a made-to-measure suit. I'm going to build myself a bike. He's going to provide me with some Reynolds 531 tubing, and it'll be so light I'll be able to lift the frame with one finger. She finally paused for breath. Rosie stared in disbelief, her bright blue eyes open wide. You don't have to look like that, Rosie Ackroyd. If you and Ralph are lucky, I might be able to provide you with work when your customers for sledges melt away with the spring sunshine.